For our last 3 lessons, I want to talk about Adobe's Media Encoder because it is again included in the Adobe Creative Cloud, whether you have the entire subscription or you're just subscribing to Premiere Pro. Now, I have mentioned up until this point when talking about exporting only how to export from within Premiere. But I do want to mention about the interoperability between Adobe's Media Encoder and Premiere. And I'm going to start talking about that a little bit in this lesson. Now, I want to show you at its most basic how you're going to export a file from Adobe's Media Encoder. Now, we're going to assume that for argument's sake, you've just taken a file and exported a master clip from Premiere, and you now like to take it and make an approval file out of it. So how we go about doing that is we take the master file that we've exported to our desktop. In this case, we'll take the Our First Sequence QuickTime Movie. I'm going to take it, I'm going to drag it over here into the queue. Now you'll notice as soon as I drag it over here, I haven't let it go yet, but you can see that I can drop here to add it as a separate source, or if I had a whole group of clips, I could stitch those clips together to be one clip so that we have one clip when we're done exporting. But for the purposes of what I'm doing, I just want to export this one clip as a new type of file. Now once I let go, I can now navigate over to the preset browser and choose from any one of these presets in here, or much like we've done inside of Premiere, I could create my own preset. Or what I could do is I could take one of those presets that we've created inside of Premiere, which will be located inside of the User Presets and Groups dropdown. You'll see there's our H.264 for client approval preset, and I could take that and drag it and drop it over onto my clip and use that preset to export. Now what's also very cool about Adobe's Media Encoder is what I also have the ability to do is I can take multiple presets and drag them over and add them to the same clip so that I will export multiple versions of this clip depending on how many different types of exports that I need. Now I'm just going to select one of these and delete them because I don't need them both. I'm just going to say yes to remove them. If I'm ready now to export this clip to the desktop, I could simply choose where I want the file to go to. In this case, it's going to the desktop. I'm not going to give it the same name. I'll call it _revised. I'll say save, and I could now simply say start queue. Once I say start queue, depending on the length of your clip and the codec that you've chosen, your export times will vary, but inevitably what you're going to end up with is your final clip, whatever the codec you chose or the export preset you chose, with that type of file on the desktop or whichever drive you sent your clip to. Now, I do want to talk about other situations that you're going to run into because the example that we're using is not really a realistic example of taking your clip, exporting it from Premiere to the desktop, and then coming into Adobe's Media Encoder. I'm going to show you 2 other workflows that you can utilize to do the exact same technique that we just showed you, and it doesn't involve exporting a master clip first. Let me show you the first one. What I'm going to do is just delete this clip from the queue, and instead of dragging a clip into Adobe's Media Encoder, I'm going to drag our Premiere Pro project. Now, you'll remember that when I created the DaVinci Resolve timeline, I actually now have 2 timelines inside of my Premiere Pro project. So the great thing with taking a project and dragging it into the queue is what's going to happen is that Media Encoder is going to analyze that project and say, well, hey, you actually have a couple of clips or a couple of timelines in here that you can work with. Which one would you like to bring into Adobe's Media Encoder? Now you'll see that I can select Our First Sequence, and what I can even do is hold Command or Control on the keyboard, whether you're on Mac or Windows, to select both sequences. I can now say import. Both of those sequences will now appear inside of Adobe's Media Encoder, and it will always remember the last preset that you had applied and automatically apply it to the new clips in the queue. Now let me show you one last way to get your timeline from Premiere into Media Encoder, and it doesn't involve you really leaving Premiere at all. What I'm going to do is Command or Alt and Tab back into Premiere. Let's, with our timeline, use the shortcut to get to the Export Settings window, Command or Control and M on the keyboard. Once the Export Settings window appears and you have everything set the way that you want, what you could do is simply come down here and hit the Queue button, and that timeline will be queued up inside of Adobe's Media Encoder, ready for you to take and convert to whatever type of file you need it to be.